4, 3, 2, 1. So there's a global pandemic. Your two guides were out for a week, so you have nothing to do. You don't know where to go. You don't know if you have to bury your head in the sand, or climb a mountain, or store water. There's no answers to those questions, but this week, the prodigal sons return to the microphones to discuss COVID-19, where we're from, where we're going, where we're currently at. And this week, you're joined by just me, Steven, and Jacob, the always there hero of the show. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm great. I feel like I'm not the hero this week because I had a busy week this week.
You're
Coming back
always the
from
hero.
coming back from vacation. I don't know if anybody else is like this, but coming back from vacation, you work twice as hard going into vacation. So you put in the extra hours before you leave. You go on vacation, you come back, and the first 3 or 4 days is just nothing but responding to emails, firefighting, trying to figure out what happened and why it happened, and making sure you correct any kind of action that was taken. You're like, oh wow, I just spent, you know, the week leading in and the week leading out of vacation working my ass off. That's where I'm at right now. I'm kind of in the middle of that working your ass off stage.
I got you. You coming in, going out. You're trying to get everything done. Then you're trying to catch up. I'm in the trying to rev the engine desperately. My productivity engine is on a crank now, like old timey car. Like come on, come on. You just need to succeed at 1 or 2 tickets, and then you're gonna be on the roll. You just got to get her done. So I've been working on this. I will tell you a tip for Scrum masters out there, agile masters of the craft of moving cards from to do to done. My our agile person, coach, master, strategist, whatever, when I got back from PTO, sent me an email that said, "Hey Steven, while you were out, these 3 things popped up, and if you could look at this card when you get a chance, that would be great. I think that's all." I was like, I have a freaking checklist. This is the greatest. This is the greatest thing, because like you never know where to start because so much happens, and we were mid sprint, so it was like second week of the 2 week sprint, and I'm like, what do I do? Where do I jump in? And she's like, I got you, bro, and sent me the little email, and I was like, oh my word, now I know what my priorities are. I'm the happiest person alive. Now that might not work for everybody, but for me, as a list kind of person who likes checking boxes, that was everything, and I was happy.
See, you're motivated by that. You're like, oh yes, I got tasks, and this task, if I put a check mark, I've done it. I don't necessarily have a boss that does that. My boss looks at me 1 month and says, "Here, need you to go take care of this," and then I just go take care of it. And a month later, I come back and say, "It's done." He's like, "Great job."
Pat you on the back. No, I'm so I did that quadrant thing where they tell you what kind of personality you are at work. I'm a clarity personality, both at
Mhm.
work and at home. I need details. I need clear. That's why you and I sometimes bump heads, not bump heads in a violent way, but you'll be like, "Get me that thing over there," and Stephanie does the same thing to me. I need that, and there's like 75 things in the corner you just pointed at. And I'm like, what? What that are you talking about? See, you expect me to understand the context of what we're doing, look,
Yep.
see exactly what you saw, and grab it. And that's fine. To somebody who's in that headspace, that's great. But to me, I'm like, what if I grab the wrong thing that he doesn't want? That would make me look stupid. Jacob, what specifically do you want in this corner of the room with all the junk? It's really funny, but that's how. So that when I get a list and clear direction, I'm like, I know exactly what the objective is. I know exactly why, because that's another piece for me. Why am I doing it? And then I'm a happiest little employee you've ever seen. I will code
Yeah,
the
man.
mess out of something. It's a
I will
good
tell
time.
you this: the shrimp po' boy night just 100% clarified that, because I'm like, "Hey, Steven, what do you think about that over there, doing this and that?" And you're like, uh, "What object are you referring to, Jacob?"
What are you talking about? But gutting the shrimp was a very clear process with a very clear goal, and I went down there and knocked it out while watching the bejesus out of DuckTales. And
Ducktales,
woo!
woo!
It was great. It was great. I had not watched DuckTales before, and it was wonderful. And I
Well,
did it
hold
while
on,
gutting
wait.
shrimp.
You did watch DuckTales like the original ones, right?
Yes.
You
Oh
just
yeah.
haven't watched the new upgraded or
Right.
updated versions. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And doing that while pulling turds out of shrimp is really a great activity, and I'd recommend it to many people everywhere.
It's that DuckTales is legit though. I've got to tell you, I haven't kept up with the cartoons these days, but I will tell you this. Watching that episode, I'm like, "Ooh, I think I'm going to sit down and enjoy this.
It's
This
good.
is pretty impressive."
It's funny, and it's better than it has any right to be. As a 35-year-old man, cartoons, I've never been a cartoon. Even as a kid, I was mostly movies and live action stuff, but I'd watch cartoons in the afternoon. And
Mhm.
this one, I usually don't grab a hold, but this one's got me. I'm like, oh, this story is compelling. It's so good. Oddly Normal ones chimed in. He says they're great too. But the big thing is, Jacob, you and I went to the beach during
We did.
COVID-19.
We did. That was a
And
big deal.
yeah, and we survived so far. It
I'm
seemed
I'm
like,
gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna tell on Ashley real quick though. I will. She may not agree with the survival part. She had to pee in a cup and dump it out the window
Yeah,
twice.
we did do that, didn't we?
Yep. I'm not sure she's gonna actually agree with you on the survived part.
Yeah, I didn't even pee in a cup. I made it all the way home. No pee.
No pee
No
for me either.
no gas station, no pee. Didn't have to do it was the perfect distance because we used a little less than a half a tank going there and a little less than a half a tank coming back. And
Yep.
it was, it was just right to get gas when we got home, not have to go in anywhere. It was great. We did pull over for Sam at least once so he could pee in a cup.
I pulled over so that Ashley could drop the pee out. I didn't want her, driving 70 miles an hour down the highway, just dumping it out the side and just getting everything in the bed of the truck just soaked with her urine.
Oh yeah, that's a good. Blowing into the back of the truck would have been bad. So there's your pro tip, everybody.
Yes.
Pee in a cup, slow down to dump it out, and just roll. So
Yep.
you've got 100% good evidence that a beach house vacation works.
Yep.
If you are the Kardashians, you can do a beach island vacation with your family that you rented, so you can
Yes.
feel what normal is again. Uh,
That's
but the rest of us, and I'm sure there's somebody out there going, "Oh, just get a beach house like the dorks did, and that's just so they can feel normal." And I'm like, "No, beach houses aren't normal. They're just something we pooled our resources to do."
yep.
But yeah, the Kardashians having their little private island is as their normal kind of made me want to throw up just a
Yeah.
little bit.
But I mean, if I look at probably most of America, I think they can identify with a small group of people pooling resources and renting a home somewhere, either on the beach or in the mountains or a cabin or something, getting away for a weekend or a week, and enjoying a vacation in that kind of style. I don't think the one percenters might agree that they need to rent an island, but I think majority of Americans do something similar to what we did this week. I mean, there might be a percentage that don't do that, but
Yeah, and
I think
replace
most people
house
can
with
at least identify with it.
Sure. And replace house with condo. I mean, we did
Yeah,
condos at the beach for a long
we
time.
have. Yeah.
Hotel at the beach. If you've got a camper at the beach. But yeah, I think you're looking at a lot of middle class America is either pooling the resources or finding a way to enjoy a beach vacation in a similar capacity to what we did.
Yeah.
Um,
And we might have splurged a little bit this
we
time just
did.
to get the house, but we didn't want to go into a condo situation with COVID-19. We didn't want to go into a hotel situation with COVID-19. So we felt like, okay, let's go ahead and get a house that was going to be big enough for the three different families.
And it worked out.
So
Yeah,
it
we
did.
you pitch in a little bit extra, and you got a house that was just about perfect for what if the elevator had been working, it would have been perfect
Yeah.
for what we wanted. But it was certainly great. There's enough room for everybody to space out. It was fun. It was good. But so that
It was.
I don't know if that covers our roundtable of where we've been and what we're doing. But it's certainly what we've been doing for the last week, because you and I have been in the same space. I will say this regarding the beach house. I feel like it was refreshing, and I feel like life is gonna be okay. Just
Yeah.
getting out of these four walls kind of helped in my head somehow determine
Hmm.
that there's things we can do that we can minimize risk and still have a good time. Like
Yeah.
it kind of opened my eyes to possibilities that you can't do all the time, but there's like if a few months from now we're like, let's see if we can get a little cabin in Gatlinburg and go check out the winter time in the mountains for a couple days over the
Yep.
weekend. That's close enough that we could pull that off. You know, there's things like that that you're like, okay, we've got to find ways to get the kids out of the house, to get me and Stephanie out of the house, to find places to go.
Yep.
Um, that was good. It's not like you're opening Pandora's box. I'm not running to Walmart or anything, but
Right.
the that worked, and I think
Yeah.
that made my brain a little happier with the
Well, and
situation.
I think it not only made you happier, but it also it helped out with overall our core group that we have, our pod, because we have three families that don't go out very often, right? And one of them desperately, our father-in-law and mother-in-law desperately needed to get away for a little while. They haven't been inside of a non-doctor's office or a non um, medical type of facility since the pandemic began back in March. And
Yeah,
so to get them just out into a vehicle, into a different setting, I think was really, really good for them. Um, and then it was also good for Ashley too. And I'm going to tell on Ashley a little bit too. She hasn't left very much. I mean, outside of going to doctor's visits with her family or checkups for the kiddo, or she hasn't really gone anywhere. No, she hasn't gone to the grocery store. She hasn't gone to any gas station. She hasn't gone anywhere really. And so for her, she even got to the point where she was like, okay, I'll accompany you today to go look for a chair because we needed to pick up a chair. And so we were actually able to find a time and a location that we felt comfortable with where we went and looked at a chair and didn't find what we were looking for and just turned around and walked away. But I mean, it's starting to feel like maybe we could, if take given the right precautions, we can at least perform some activities that that aren't so far into a danger zone, so to speak.
yeah. It's like you pick your times, you pick your events, but yeah, like going out as a couple to any store is not something Stephanie and I have done since
Right.
March, easy. And like
No.
that's the thing that you kind of miss. Like it's always I'm going to Harris Teeter to grab something real
Yep.
quick, or she's going to do something really quick, but neither of us go together because we don't want to take Sam out into it. Um,
Exactly.
and I mean, he's a human too. He can wear a mask and be in exactly the same as we are. But kids have more of a tendency to grab stuff, put their finger up their nose,
Yep.
etc. And Sam's really good at wearing a mask. Like when he has to, that kid is all about it because he sees us and he's aware of the danger of it. He might not know what it really means, but like
Yeah.
he's always like, I don't need to go because there's the virus, you know, and that which also has its own things that worry me. Uh,
Connotation, right?
yeah, his own my own level of like, oh shoot, he's going to be an anxious disaster with anything. But he's 5. He's still moldy.
Yeah.
He's still got flexibility. We can pull through. But yeah, that's good. I'm glad you guys were able to get out. I wish you could have found a chair, the miracle chair.
The miracle chair we really need to find it. But so that was the thing that we had discussed when we got back. We're like, I can't just go out and get a chair that I like because of course you're not going to like it, and you can't go out and buy a chair that you like because of course I won't like it. And this has got to be something that we do together. And we did not want to bring William out into, so we were like, no, I don't want to bring Tater Tot out into a store, period, because we can't put a mask on him. He's only 6 months old. The answer is no. But we were able to find a way to make it happen, and yeah, we were only in the store for about 10 minutes and couldn't find what we liked, so we passed.
Do you feel like there's a time bomb strapped to your butt when you go into a store now, like that you need to get out quicker than you maybe used to?
I don't linger. I think it's not a time bomb. I think before where you would go into a store and you would say, "Oh, that kind of looks nice." There is no shopping. It is
Hmm.
purely getting. It is obtaining. It's like I need this, so I'm going to go get this.
Yeah.
It's not a, oh, I'm going to go see what would go well with dinner tonight. Let's go see what they have. I wonder if they have any fresh local produce.
Yeah.
None of that. It's I'm going to buy some asparagus to go with my steak, and that's what I go do. Um,
That's very much
so
how
it,
I always shopped, though, to be
yeah,
fair. As a man who shops, I'm like, I need a pair of pants. Go in store, men's section, pants section,
yes,
grab pants, my size, leave. Try on pants. Pants don't fit. Take back to store. Like, I don't try on pants at the store. Like, no, I'll take them back if they don't fit. I'm in and out,
uh,
baby, all the time. Ain't got time to waste.
she said. So Og in the chat asked, "Well, why don't you just get two chairs?" Well, unfortunately, it's going into the bedroom because we need to be able to rock Tater Tot, and we don't have enough room for two big rocking, gliding chairs. Um,
Those chairs are
his and hers
beasts.
chairs. Oh, they're beasts, but they're so nice. They're so nice.
If you can get a
So
good one, it is legit, and
it is.
I fully support you getting a chair. We're Stephanie and I are on the elliptical machine hunt right now because we're like can't go back to the gym, and I'm convinced that why is my phone beeping? That's weird. I'm convinced that if I have it in the house, I know people are gonna laugh at me. They're gonna make fun of me because everybody says this, but if you have it in the house and it's a habit in the morning, you just do it and you put it in the way where you're not putting it off in some attic or closet somewhere where you're never going to do it. You put it directly in your path of things you have to do, and that's our goal. When we got back from the beach, like, listen, I'm tired of being unhealthy. You're tired of being unhealthy. We both know we've used elliptical machines a ton in the past at the gym, and it's been great, and we've done well on them. So we're gonna look for one. That's our big
Yeah,
shopping experience. And shopping online is hard for that because you're like, what about Stride and what about how the big it is? And I can't go to. I'm not going to Academy Sports. Are you crazy? That place is
yeah.
insane. Touching exercise equipment, BS. So I'm really
Mhm.
having to do the opposite of what you did. I'm like looking for things that I know fit matters, and
Yep.
I'm having to make a decision by descriptions online. I'm like, oh, this feels so uncomfortable, but I'm gonna do it because I was going to the gym at work and I was on the elliptical machine every morning for 30 minutes, and I'm like, if I can do that at work, I can do it at home where my TV is.
It's very true.
Jeez.
And I always used to get those good notifications on my watch, basically saying, "Steven has done a workout." And I'm like, "Shit, I need to catch up."
Yeah, I can do that. I can totally make it happen. So that's the goal, is to find us a decent elliptical machine. So good luck on your chair hunt. And I will look for elliptical machine, and we'll both get the thing we need to be happy again.
I hope
till
so.
till the next thing when we have to be happy. We need another thing to be happy again. We'll figure it out.
Mhm.
But yeah, moving right along, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how we want to do this, but we're gonna try. So Jacob and I, and Landon for a while, and then some guests. We've been doing this show for 30 episodes. It's well
30.
over half a year. This is
Zero.
this is the 30th episode of Staring at Goats, which began late March, I think, is when we kicked it off. We were starting to get into COVID. Sam had his birthday, which was the last interaction with small humans that he'd had. And we started going, oh, we'll just do this show probably a couple weeks. We were even talking about maybe we'll do this show, we'll find a new hot topic to discuss on Staring at Goats once COVID is over. COVID ain't over. Not in the least bit. 80,000 cases a day is not an ending. It's not a pandemic that's over. It's not a pandemic that's closing. It's not a pandemic that's in the rearview mirror. It's not a pandemic that you're like, well, we crossed the threshold. Nope. That's not what this is. This is bad. It's staying bad. So we figured, why not take a look back at how it began? Because it's been a long time since we've discussed kind of the mentality of the nation, the events that took place to get us here.
Our mentality, not only the nation, but our personal mentalities.
Yeah, we haven't done that. So I figured, I don't know how to really do it. I just wrote down a slew of facts, but we're gonna get through this. We're gonna talk about it a little bit, where we've come from. And one of the first things I looked for, I was like, well, how many deaths per day have we had? Like, how has that arc looked? Has it gone up? Has it rambled? And I kind of looked for peaks and valleys in the stuff from Johns Hopkins. I was looking through their graphs. In February, we had 0 deaths most of the time, 1 death some of the time. And that
Yeah.
was that was when we were starting to get concerned, but nobody was
I don't
hiding.
even think I don't even think we were totally concerned at that point. We knew that something was going on in China. We knew that there was some deaths associated with it. The government of China wasn't, I don't think, as upfront and forthcoming as they could have been. But as a general public, I felt like, eh, this may not. I mean, this could be like SIRS. It could. I mean, we don't know yet, right? It could be like the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. It could be like we just don't know anything yet. So, let's keep an eye on it and keep going.
And we'd heard the same story a few years ago when that Ebola case came here. And we
Yep,
were all like, "Oh, somebody's coming to an airport with a dangerous disease. It'll probably get snuffed out pretty quick. We're America." Which was where my brain was at. I'm like, we're America. We've
we're
snuffed out
exceptional.
diseases. Yeah,
Well, we had H1N1 a few years back. We
yeah,
had so we've had these things where they've been theoretical public health emergencies and public health pandemics that we had to get prepared for if they eventually hit, but they never really hit us the way that we have now learned that it would.
right. So at the end of February, I think the main concerns we had were New York City. I think had gotten cases. Late
Mhm.
Washington State had gotten cases in Seattle. That retirement home in Seattle was a big
That was a big
place.
deal.
It was a big
Yeah.
deal. California had gotten a few. North Carolina, one had come through our airport because Stephanie and I had just come back from Disney World, learning that someone with COVID-19 had been through there 2 or 3 days earlier. And
Yeah.
I remember that was our first like, oh snap, we just brushed with that disease coming out of China. I mean, we were still calling it the Wu Tang virus. We were still
That's
laughing.
right.
We were still
That's right.
laughing about the Wu Tang virus. We thought we were hilarious. Come April 14th, 2,321 deaths daily. According to Johns
Most of those
Hopkins,
coming from New York.
yeah, most of them were from New York. Yeah, that was when hospitals were overrun. Remember when we first started this show, Landon brought up the story of a hospital his wife works at that was looted
Yeah.
for masks and protective gear. We were looking at some pretty. I mean, it wasn't riot level, but we were looking at some pretty intense social unrest due to people needing PPE. I remember the first time I heard PPE was related to this at that time. 2,300 deaths in April, though, that's a lot. And luckily, that was our peak if you
Yeah.
look at the charts, but that's still a lot.
That was a lot. And talking about our mentalities going into
Hmm.
April, I was having a child.
Yeah.
Well, I
You've
wasn't.
had
Ashley was
one.
having a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
Um, and we were curious as to whether or not I'd be able to see the birth of my child. Right. I mean, there was talk about not letting fathers into hospitals because that's what happened in a couple of isolated cases in New York. And I had traveled in the month of March with some folks from New York, and so I didn't even think anything of it at the time in March. I was like, oh yeah, everything's good. And I mean, we knew that this was coming down, but we didn't realize that mid March, late March, we were about to really see the lockdowns because I think lockdowns really happened toward the middle to end of March. I know that at least in North Carolina, that's what happened.
Yeah, I tried to find data on state lockdowns and when they happened and how they happened and stuff. That is a Google
That's a
search yourself to death. It's hard to
Yeah,
find somebody that's tabulated all of that in a concise way that you can report on a show while you're getting ready 2 hours before it.
yeah.
So I didn't find all that data, but yeah, you're right. Like New York was starting to lock down like cities. I think there's a borough in New York that was like, you guys can't leave. Like
Yeah.
just the whole town was just cordoned off, and that we were doing more localized shutdowns that weren't
Mhm.
statewide quite yet, but we were heading there. That was definitely the discussion: is how do we get control of this thing? And Oddly Norman brings up a good point too, that Fauci was also espousing not using masks at that
Mhm.
time, which is true. Um, they were saying don't use masks because first responders need them. We need to make sure that we have all this because we were running into shortages of this stuff because our stockpiles were being sent to China to help them. We didn't have what we needed, or it wasn't being distributed fast enough. Uh, I don't want to get into where the fault came from with that, but the fact of the matter
Sure.
is it wasn't getting out there.
Well, and let's take Fauci at face value. He was also telling people stay at home,
Yeah,
don't
it's
go
true.
anywhere. And if you don't go anywhere, guess what you don't need is a mask.
The first line
Uh,
of defense was stay at home orders.
Yeah, and there was one story that you and I reported on in that March April timeframe that's really stuck in my head because this exemplified the kind of mentality of the country. We didn't believe it was such a big deal. We had people going to all these different stores and buying up hand sanitizer, and then reselling them online for price gouging numbers. I mean, 10x the cost of the hand sanitizers, buying Clorox hand wipes, etc., and selling those. And the story in particular that I'm referring to is the gentleman out of
Kentucky,
Tennessee.
or was
I
it
think it was
Tennessee?
Tennessee, and he went and got a U-Haul van and just drove everywhere and picked up all the hand sanitizer he could, and then sold it off on eBay. And he ended up having that confiscated by the state of Tennessee, and he had to donate it to charity, and took about a $17,000 hit to do it. This is
Yeah.
just a yeah, but that was the mentality. It wasn't a it really wasn't here, if that makes any sense. It was somewhere else, whether that was in New York City or whether that was in China or whether that was across the coast or wherever it may have been. And I think a lot of people had that mentality.
And that was at a time too where you and I were thinking that maybe our father-in-law was right, and because he's a prepper, and
Mhm.
toilet paper was gone. If you remember that, flour was impossible to find. I was shopping for my neighbors. I was shopping for you guys when we went. I was shopping for my in-laws. Like, we were all kind of trying to help each other in a little shopping group because we haven't
Yeah.
figured out how to work, like, being absent from stores. Like, we hadn't figured out how to manage that thing, and all that toilet paper was gone. Uh,
Oh, I still remember going into a store and seeing toilet paper the first time, and I'm like, Steven, I'm bringing you
I'm
toilet
bringing you
paper.
some.
Charmin's coming your way, baby.
Yeah, yeah. You brought me a pack of toilet paper, and I was like, what? And but you also remember, if you think about the mentality of people, at least as I observed it on social networks at the time, people were staying home. They were making bread.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
remember the activity in the neighborhood had just skyrocketed. People were taking walks. There were kids at home playing outside. The misery of quarantine hadn't set in because, if you remember, we had what we thought might be a 2 to 3 week shutdown. Don't do anything. Disease goes away because it's got nobody to talk to, and we go back to normal.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen because states are independently managed, and states have their own way of doing controlled lockdowns. Georgia, for instance, like Audley says, didn't go into lockdown until mid-April. They stayed in lockdown for like 3.5 days, and then we're like, okay, reopen the restaurants and stuff. It was like,
Mhm.
what are we even doing? I mean, we had the argument 100 times about North Carolina being like, okay, you're going to lock down, you're going to say you're going to follow the science. Science isn't saying to open, you're opening anyway. Okay, and now we're in the same space. It's like 80,000 people get it per day, and it's just like, go ahead and open phase 3.5. It's like, what?
Yeah.
No, if you do anything, you should be closing back down because your numbers, if this is data driven. But yeah, we had all those discussions back then, and there was positivity in the air that we'll get through it. Companies were starting to adjust, send people home where they could. Negative impacts, people getting laid off where that couldn't be a thing.
Yep.
Um,
Furloughed.
so yeah, furloughs were a thing. I mean, we had Scott Groovis for Life on the show, lost his job due to COVID cutbacks. I know my company did some stuff. Your company did some stuff to survive, to weather it.
Yep.
And that we still don't know how long those survival tactics are gonna pay off. There's still a lot of unpredictability out there. So I mean, things have lingered all the way back from April. We're still lingering in this stay alive mode. Just
Yeah.
like,
I don't think the dog days of summer really helped because the dog days of summer are usually barbecues and weekends with family and friends and getting ready for football and watching baseball in the evenings and just doing all and those activities just didn't exist in the summer.
yeah,
There were no ice cream runs.
no Dunkin' Donuts 5K or Krispy Kreme 5K.
That's right.
No big activities. I mean, we were still planning Dragon Con at that point, but going, I don't think we're gonna be able to go.
Yeah.
That was still up in the air. Stuff getting canceled left and right. It was a weird time. It wasn't a bad time. I wouldn't call that April era, as bad.
No.
In the sense, I mean, I know that was the majority of deaths, but for the vast majority of the country, it was like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. Um, and then you
Well, that
enter.
was back when there was still a little bit of hope, I feel like.
There,
I feel
yeah,
like
there's
we
hope.
all had approached it with, okay, we're going to get through this. But then May, June, July happened.
Yeah, May, June, and July were a pretty big deal. So February, coronavirus task force gets started. The end of February, I've jumped around the dates a little bit, but like then we came into May. The first recommendation, go back to this. The first recommendation for masks happened on April 3rd. That was when they started. The CDC, the WHO all said start wearing masks because it was becoming more evident that we had a problem that could be contained better if everyone did wear a mask and we were getting our supply chains in place and handling the issue. We didn't even bring up the ventilators. Tesla, Razer, all these companies that started making ventilators
Oh, yeah. There was a
early
lot
on.
of that.
GE made a ton of ventilators. Everybody was switching their supply lines up, and we were getting back to where we could control that era. So then they started saying everybody wear masks. Little did we know it would come back to bite all these people. And months later, when they're like, "Remember when they said we didn't need them? What happened to that?" And
Yep.
whatever. We're in that space.
Hmm.
But yeah. On May 5th, the coronavirus task force started to end its daily briefings. Um, I know I just said that we had 2,300 deaths in April. In May 5th, they said, "Hey, we're going to end daily briefings." Shortly after that, the president said they're going to continue their work. They're just going to focus on getting us back to normal. So it was less, it seemed, at least from the message, less of a containment strategy, more of a let's get everybody open and hope not everyone dies.
Yeah.
We
They took the advice of Sweden and basically said, okay, let's reopen, let's create this herd immunity, which did not happen in Sweden, but that was their goal essentially.
And I'd like to go back and look at it because I don't know when this happened, and if somebody can grab that date or offhand if they know it. But when the Free Mask NC movement started, the Michigan protest started, did all that line up like towards the beginning of May, or was that like the minute mandates started happening of like lockdowns, they were all like, no, we're gonna punch everybody in the face. I'm trying to correlate like leadership messaging and civil unrest and whether there's a it lines up or it doesn't. If it doesn't, that's
Yeah.
great too, because I'd rather
I
it
think it
not line
was
up.
I mean, I believe it was toward the end of May. I don't believe it was in April, early April and mid-April. I know that some of the we kind of started seeing some embers of that in May. But I think when the George Floyd protests started happening and when some of these other civil protests happened, that's when the mass protests started happening as well. So it was kind of like this to hit you at all sides with protests
Yeah.
at that point, and I think that's where we really started having some of the people in Michigan and people in North Carolina and
Yeah.
everywhere just really start disobeying those orders.
Ace found an article May 14th, 2020 was the Michigan
Yeah,
Capitol storming the Capitol. So that's after coronavirus task force disbanded. That's when open the country kind of rhetoric started coming out in a major way. Because I think before that we had the promises of it'll be gone by Easter, miraculous, the heat'll take it out. We had all those things being said, and
hmm
that wasn't a thing. It didn't happen. But it sure did. It sure did make a lot of people feel hopeful there for a minute. And when they got slammed back down with more like slow down, they got restless.
yeah,
We're like caged animals. We don't like it. And then May 25th was the George Floyd situation, which I think became, I mean, there were spreader. It was a spreader event. There were a lot of people in those pictures without any masks anywhere. And that was on top of like you had Memorial Day stuff that happened, and then we saw that 2 week spike. I think we all went through all this back when we were doing the show at the time. We were trying to correlate holiday events and long weekends with all this stuff.
yeah. We
Um,
were we were also trying to the Tulsa event. I remember we followed that for several weeks
yeah,
after the rally in Tulsa. Yeah, there were a lot of things that we were reporting on. The other thing that I'd like to bring up and in this context is what happened relative to COVID. And the first test was developed in early April and mid-April and released, and so we're starting to really get those tests out there. They weren't perfect, but they were something.
hmm
I think over the course of the last 6, 7 months, they've um, really done a good job on getting the proper tests out there, especially the molecular and the PCR ones. Um, so yeah, I think there was some of that, and then of course all of the vaccine work. There were over 280 last time I counted companies that were actively working on vaccines, which is just a huge number. And then of course everybody knows of the big four that are kind of in that lead pack to hopefully get a vaccine to us in the near future. Um, but yeah, that all happened in that same time frame, and the other thing I'd like to stress here is that hospitals had to do a lot more. I mean, there were some ups and downs. There were some hospitals that were at max capacity and bulging out the seams. There were some hospitals that had to pull capacity from other hospitals. Uh, they had to do a lot of sharing of resources. They had to do reporting not only to the state, but also to the federal government. So they had to add resources to be able to do this. I mean, those really were a lot of the unsung heroes that I don't think we'll ever actually fully appreciate and talk about are some of the things that happened in those hospitals to make treating the people with this disease actually make it through and make their experience a little bit better.
And I think about all the photos on Reddit I saw early of like the nurses and doctors who'd had those masks on all day that were just basically bruised
Yeah.
from having that. And those, like, I mean, they really were saving the day, you know. And I remember one doctor in a passionate plea on Instagram or TikTok or something was like in his scrubs at the hospital, and he was like, I don't want PPE. I want you to stay home. I want you to
Yeah.
wear a mask if you go out. I don't want. And this is what America's really great at. And America, I say great a little bit sarcastically, but great at handling and not proactively doing anything. We reactively do things. This is every company I've ever been a part of has been a reactionary company. It's like, oh yeah, our security's great. Oh shoot, we got a security incident. Oh, let's my pants are on fire, my hair is on fire, fix everything. It's like we've been telling you to fix this stuff for 6 months. That we had a problem, we had a little bit of a hole here or there, and it's like, if you would just do the thing you're supposed to do to prepare for this stuff, you wouldn't be in this place. But, and I think that's human nature. We just tend to
Mhm.
roll on until something happens. I'm bad about this. You know, I do it all the
Sure.
time. I have a great disaster handbook in my closet that has all kinds of things you should just have on hand. You're better at it than me. You've got at least got a go bag.
I
Um,
do.
yeah, I don't have a go bag. I have stuff that should go in one. But
Mhm.
like these are things that we're not good at. If it hasn't happened, it might not happen. So why put all that stress into it? Which is why we
Yeah.
don't have a pandemic response team, because they were sitting around doing nothing. There was no pandemic. So it's like when
Yeah.
your network team is sitting there spinning plates and they're like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "Well, everything's working, so it means I'm doing my job."
Yeah.
You need me when
Well,
it
and
breaks.
oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And then you had things like baseball coming back online, and you had basketball coming
Yeah.
back online, and you had preps for football and trying to figure out how to make that happen. And soccer was happening around the world and to empty stadiums. And there were a lot of things going on and trying to figure out how to do it safely and how not to do it safely or how not to do fans and other things. I mean, there were a lot of things happening at that point.
Yeah.
Um, which kind of bridges or segues us into kind of the next topic. There are two things that happened in sports while we were gone. One is we crowned an NBA champion, the Los Angeles Lakers, um, in front of no fans or very few fans. Um, but it was a successfully run bubble. And then last night you crowned the Dodgers as the World Series champions. And I'm
Do you want
about
to
to
do you
get
want to get
into it.
into it? Do you want to go ahead and go there? Because I want to play a button if you're ready to rock.
I got to go into it, man.
Okay,
I got
you're
to do
about to
it. You play the
explode.
button.
Here's the button.
No, God!
Hold on.
I'm as mad as
Nope.
hell!
You know what really grinds my gears?
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
I can't tell if it's done or not because I
It's
can't hear anything.
you can't hear it, but it's done.
No, I can't hear anything. We'll edit that out later. But I'm as mad as hell, and I think that's what he probably just played is that I'm as mad as hell.
I did.
Because I watched Justin Turner yesterday. Um, how do I want to put this? Baseball had done such a good job all the way up until yesterday. And yesterday, it absolutely exploded. It made the NBA look great. And Justin Turner, what he did, I got to call him out. If anybody's a fan of Justin Turner's, I'm sorry, but he's a flaming asshole. And I'll tell you why. And I'll give all the context for this, but I'll tell you why. Um, when he took off his mask to take pictures surrounded by that World Series trophy and with all of his teammates around him, he became the asshole that I hated. Now, I'll give you all the context. So, yesterday, he was tested. Everything looked okay. He went into the game. He played the first 7, 8 innings, was playing well, got pulled aside between the 7th and 8th inning and said, "Hey, look, you were actually tested positive. Both of your samples tested positive for COVID-19. This isn't a false negative. I'm sorry, but you got to leave this. You got to leave. You can't be out and playing anymore." This was in the 8th inning of a game deciding World Series freaking game. So shame on you, Major League Baseball, because you let that man play the entire time, all the way up until the 8th inning, and did tell him in the 8th inning that he could no longer play. So shame on you, Major League Baseball. That was strike number one on you guys. The samples were going into Utah because Utah is the place that was doing all the testing for them, and Utah is overrun right now with not only samples but their hospitals are overrun. The virus is just running rampant through Utah, but that's where the Major League Baseball was sending all their samples. And so I'm not saying that there was a delay because of this, but I am saying that Utah is bursting at the seams right now, and that's who received the samples to be tested. So I don't know if there was some kind of delay in getting them the information before this game started. I don't want to make any conjecture there. But what happened was they pulled him aside and said, "Look, I'm sorry, you got to leave." And I understand his position. I completely understand. He's been with the Dodgers for 7 years. The man is a good baseball player. He was part of the reason why they won yesterday. He wants to be out there playing. He wants to be out there with his teammates. He wants to be out there finishing up the World Series game, period. End of discussion. For him not to be able to do that had to really suck. And then once they won, for him not to be out there celebrating something that hasn't happened in LA for over 30 years, almost 40 years, I think. I can't remember. It was in the 80s the last time they won. Um, but in almost 40 years, it doesn't happen very often. And this was a stressful season to begin with. And to be out there with your teammates is 100% what needed to happen. And I didn't even fault him for going out and celebrating with his teammates with a mask on. I felt like, okay, I get it. I understand. The other teams off the field, the people that don't know now are gone. So the people that know, which are his teammates and the people of the Dodgers organization, are out on the field right now. Then he could go because then they can experience social distancing. They could still celebrate. He could still be out there in that environment, in that atmosphere, and he could still do his thing. So I was fine all the way up until that um, point whenever they started taking the pictures. And I get it. He's part of a team. He does not want to be the one person left out of that photograph that's going to sit on the wall at Dodger Stadium forever. Period. He does not want to be that guy in the mask that you can't even tell who it is. I mean, you'd be able to tell because of his beard coming
yeah.
out. But I understand his mentality. But for him to pull his face mask down in front of all of his peers and his colleagues after knowing that he was COVID-19 positive, that's what pissed me off. Now, 2 hours earlier, he didn't know. So he was fine, he thought. And I'm not going to fault him for that. But once you know, your actions all of a sudden become of grave importance. The person he was sitting next to, his coach, had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He is a survivor, a cancer survivor. And the man was sitting right next to him, hugging him. And he had COVID-19, an active infection, without a freaking mask on. Are you kidding me? You, sir, have turned into the asshole that I hate. And I'm sorry. If you want to come on, please, I'd love to come on and you could defend yourself, because I'd love to hear your defense here, because I can't see a good defense for pulling your mask down with your coach right next to you who has health conditions and taking those photographs. I don't understand it. All the way up until then, I was with you, brother. I was with you 100% lockstep. But the minute you did that, you got me off your bandwagon. I am completely off of his bandwagon. Good for the Dodgers on the win. awful for Justin Turner and what happened at the end. And also awful for Major League Baseball. They should have gotten him off the field. They should have gotten him out of the stadium. They should have had a protocol in place to say, if he tests positive in the middle of the game, get him out of the stadium, because don't leave it to the Dodgers organization to make this decision, because they're going to make the wrong one. Don't leave it to him to make this decision, because he's going to make the wrong one. The Major League Baseball should have had a car there waiting for him to bring him to a hotel, get Uber to bring food to him, and celebrate with champagne and food in his hotel room. That's what they should have done, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Shame on them. Sorry.
Hey, that's a good take. Because I think you're right. Who's responsible for the protocols if this happens? Because like, if your heart's in it, as a person who sees another human and goes, man, they deserve a right to whatever. Like, I think you're right. The MLB had a couple options. Like, you tested positive. We've already let him play 8 innings. What difference does another inning make? Let him finish the game and then quietly handle it like afterwards. Of course, he's already a spreader. He's already been in the dugout with his coach. I know the picture was he was in much closer proximity probably than he had been. But he's been pacing in the dugout, hanging on the fencing, spitting in the things. Like, he's a baseball player. They pace a lot and they spit a lot. This is what they do. They drag their knuckles on the ground. I'm kidding. But there was no. I'm hesitant to worry that the picture is the thing that's going to be considered the super spreader event. I think the spreader event. I think you're more likely that the time spent in the dugout is the time that it's been transferred to everybody. Oh yeah, don't forget the crotch adjusting.
I understand that, because I get not taking precautions if you believe that you've got nothing to worry
if you
about.
don't know. Yeah, very true.
If you know and you purposefully go out there and put yourself and everybody else at risk, knowing that you now have this, that's where you become the asshole. And that's where what I think I have the biggest problem with. He knew what he had. He knew he was going back out there. He knew when he took his mask off. He knew when they were taking those photos. That's the problem. Before, during the 8 innings, he didn't know. And I don't blame him for what happened there. I don't even blame Utah. I don't blame Major League Baseball. I mean, I'm not blaming anybody at that point, because it's got to happen that way. If that was the inherent risk of it, right?
Yeah.
But when all of a sudden you've taken the risk out of it and you've placed it into the court of the Dodgers and that player, and they decided to completely neglect his responsibility to his fellow man, and that to me is pretty poor character on his part.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's the feeling like, if I'm hanging out in a dugout and put myself in the situation, it's World Series, I'm excited, I'm having a blast. They tell me I have COVID. Where does your mind go? Like, where's the first thoughts? And to me, the first thoughts would likely be the people I've been spending very close proximity time with for the last 3 games, whenever he could have contracted it. And then going, oh shoot, it's time to limit as much of my interaction with these people as possible. And this is the worst day of my life. This is the worst time to do it. This is the suckiest position I could ever be in. But these people have people that they hang around with, and people that they are, and like you said, lymphoma, their own big issues that they've got to take care of. And I need to get out of Dodge, and try to make room for it. So that sucks. It sucks for him, that his World Series is tainted, and likely the opinions of many other people about him, yourself included, tainted. But
I mean, how about this? Luckily, I'm not a huge Dodgers fan. How about this? Justin Turner was somebody that I knew. I didn't know him. I wasn't following him as a baseball player, but I knew who he was. I knew he was a good third baseman. I knew he was a good player on the Dodgers, and he was probably responsible for quite a few of those runs that went into those wins, right? But
yeah,
I never had any reason to question his character, because he was beloved in LA. I mean, he spent 7 years there. He was kind of the guy, the everyman's guy there. It wasn't the big flashy star. He was the workhorse there. And that's what he had a reputation for. And now I feel like he's going to have quite a few people, myself included, that will never look at him the same.
Yeah. You're
So
probably right. It could be and I'm sure it's not the last that we'll hear of the MLB and the events and all those things going on
sure.
with and who got infected, which LA Dodgers players are coming out infected, and which ones aren't. Who's coming out of there, or do all of them come out scot free, and then you have more people going, "This pandemic is fake. What are we
Oh yeah.
doing?"
Well, and
Which is
to
the
be 100%
horrifying
honest
thing.
with you, if I think a lot of them on the Dodgers team would probably never even get tested because either one, they're going to be asymptomatic, or two, mildly symptomatic. It's their loved ones and some of the other folks, because now they don't have to go through this training protocol or this testing protocol anymore. Yesterday
Yeah,
was the last day, which really freaking sucks about this whole situation is that it was the last day. It was the crowning moment for Major League Baseball, right? They were able to get their season done. They were able to crown a World Series champion, and they were able to do it relatively event free. I mean, there were a couple of hiccups along the way. I mean, everybody remembers the Marlins and some of the other craziness that were happening, and but for the most part, I think they got away with it being pretty good. It did. This happens on the last day, and I feel like it marred it. It made Adam Silver probably the happiest man alive because he's like, we didn't do that shit. NBA came out scot free, and we didn't do that shit.
except for the chicken wings. Except
Except
for
for the
the
chicken
chicken
wings.
wings,
Chicken wings
that
got it.
happened. But again, that was localized and handled relatively quickly, and not during a championship game.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's very true.
we
But
did well with sports. This season of sports did pretty good. Is football going? Football's a thing, right?
football's a big thing, and I do want to call out Ace. I know that she was talking earlier about her Steelers going 6-0 last week. Steelers are a pretty good football team this year. I think they're probably one of the better teams in the AFC this year. Her Pitt Panthers are struggling a little bit over there. They got their ass kicked by Notre Dame last week, but that's okay. That's you can't win them all, right? Um,
Yeah, it's fine. It's
yeah,
fine.
it's
They'll
okay. But
bounce
yeah,
back.
the football is actually a thing. I mean, Big Ten started last week, so they're coming back online when they originally thought that they weren't going to play. So I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling the NFL is going to see this through to the end. They're going to have some hiccups. I know a lot of players are getting tested and testing positive, and some of them they're seeing some false negatives and false positives and other things. But overall, I think we're going to see football over the finish line here. What I'm interested to see is what actually happens with the football playoffs this year for college, and how they're actually going to select those teams and what that process is going to look like. Because some teams are going to have more games, other teams are going to have more high quality games. It's going to be a real nightmare toward the end of the season to try to figure out who the champion's going to be. But
That's a really good
I don't
point.
know.
I
I,
didn't think
I
about varying approaches to COVID affecting player performance and how they're
yeah.
gonna do overall. That's pretty interesting. Like if you're a pool player and you don't own your own pool table. This is a stupid scenario, and you can't go to the bar while Jimmy downtown goes to the bar all the time. Your championship is gonna really be kind of lopsided. Um,
Yeah.
that's really probably the worst way I could explain that, but I think it gets the point across. You're an
Yeah.
uneven playing field, where
Yeah.
it used to be better. But we should probably move a little bit along because I know we wanted to cover a couple of these stories that we pulled this week.
Well,
Um,
I could pull one of them in right now, and because since we're already talking about it,
yeah,
and
let's do it.
that's about the Jacksonville Jaguars and their running back. I think it's Raquel. I can't remember how to pronounce his first name, but Armstead. He was the running back that was supposed to replace Fournette out of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He tested positive for COVID, and he's had a real struggle getting well.
Really,
He's still not well, and he's looking at potentially missing the entire season. 23-year-old placed on injured reserve because he just can't get well. So I think what this is telling me is that yeah, we could talk about how, oh, if players get it, it's not going to be that big of a deal. They're young, they're athletic, they're in good shape, they've got great lung capacity, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the case. There are some players that are going to get it that are going to struggle. And this is just one of them. I mean, he was expected to be the starting running back for the Jaguars, and he looks like he won't be playing for the entire year this year.
Wow. It
Yeah.
just goes to show, like, sure, we say being young, you're less susceptible, but it's just not 100% guarantee. This guy's like eats 500,000 calories a day, works out constantly, does everything he's supposed to do, out and having a time getting it back together. Um that's not going to be a unique tale, man. And especially with any college students out there like, time to go to school and drink myself stupid. It's not a great idea.
Yeah.
It's not a great idea to place all your chips on being young and healthy,
Yeah.
you know.
And we're going to see what happens, I think, with colleges as well, because we want to see whether colleges are going to go back for the spring semester and what kind of spring sports are going to be available to students. And so there's going to be a lot of more decisions that are going to be made here in the next couple of months regarding spring sports and colleges in general. So
I'm really
stay tuned.
interested in social memory when it comes to college attendance. And this is what we touched on with Patrick a couple weeks ago, but like the industry of college, the money that flows into college for the reasons they say you're flowing that money in, you're not using those through dorm rooms. Your books can a lot of the times be purchased digitally, where the overhead cost is minimal, outside of the writing of it and the publishing of it. It's the distribution of it is super duper 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 cheap. You're not printing it, you're just replicating a file on a disk somewhere. This kind of stuff, like, I'm anxious to see is in the years ahead if we remember it well enough to go, I'm not gonna pay you all this money for nothing. And if that
Yeah.
gets exposed, if that creates any sort of rifts, I mean, I've already seen people talking about it in terms of like college is a racket, and this proves it. Um, and I don't think college is a racket. I have my own opinions about college, but I don't think it's a complete racket. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a pretty wild thing, and that includes the sports situation. Like, is college just mainly a thing for sports because it's the only reason you go to a college because you like that team? In a lot of cases, like, I would have gone to Auburn if I had wanted to go to college because I like Auburn football. They have a computer program, probably. They're not known for it, but daggone, to be in Auburn football, that would have been cool. Or you
Yeah.
go because somebody's, it's like, hey, come do this for me, and I'll
Yeah.
give you money.
And I'll talk a little bit about some colleges. I mean, colleges are not immune to this. I mean, if you
No.
look at what's happening at college and universities, they're canceling programs left and right. They're canceling athletic programs. They're firing staff. If you look at Division I schools, they're getting rid of all of their staff that's helping out with their football programs and with their baseball programs, with their basketball programs, and they're leaving like one coach still there. So there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes right now in colleges and universities that I don't think most people are really paying too much attention to.
Yeah. Moving right along a little bit, post football, we had this article that I think is just worth a quick blurb about. But the White House chief of staff says we're not going to control the pandemic. That story's not really changed since the onset. I was about to say, like, when we were going through our recap, I was like, well, after May, it's kind of a broken record.
Yeah.
Someone does something stupid. Football does something stupid. Basketball, whatever, does something stupid. Leadership says something stupid. Rinse, repeat. Make it all. Vaccines are in the background, just desperately trying to get created, do their job. Like, scientists all over the planet are just desperately trying to do their job. And as long as everything else keep making noise, they don't end up in the news with every
Yeah,
iota of things that they have to talk about.
I feel like that's actually a great way of putting it. The eye of Sauron is on these people. It's not on the scientists that are out doing their job and making it happen. It's on these talking heads, which keep it there. I love it. Make sure that they're the ones that are getting the attention and they're the ones that are throwing these stupid ass sound bites out there. Because at the end of the day, I think we realize that most of them are stupid ass sound bites. Um, a lot of what's coming out of that, I don't believe that they fully believe. I mean, nobody fully believes that we're out of the woods of COVID, but yet that's been said, right?
Yeah.
Um, More cases than ever today. um, so I don't believe anybody truly believes that we're completely out of the woods. What I think what that article's really getting at is more of a mentality. I mean, we're really we're turning a corner in the way we're thinking about this by saying, okay, can we actually achieve herd immunity? And most of the way you achieve herd immunity is through vaccinations. So if 60 to 70% of your population gets vaccinated, and a smaller percentage, maybe 10 or 20%, actually get the virus and generate their own antibodies, then you're up to about a 75 to 80% worth of people that now have some sort of protection. And then the remaining population is now considered safe because it doesn't really travel as fast, right? Um, but it's going to take a massive undertaking. How long, Stephen, do you believe it will take to get 70% of the U.S. population vaccinated?
Better part of a year.
I,
And that's
I,
after a supply chain has been created and is rolling.
yeah.
Like that's so they get a vaccine. They're like, this vaccine will work. That's getting it into a manufacturing process that produces it. And then the thing about it is the world needs it. We act like it's just our little country with our walls. Like, sure, our country can protect the vast majority of its citizens, but there's still people traveling in and out, going all over the place, doing all this stuff. Um, I don't know. I think that we're not going to be the only ones that want that drug. And we seem to think we're in some sort of bubble, and Pfizer's going to be like, hey, we're manufacturing in the USA, and we're only giving it to USA first. No,
Yeah.
they want that cash money, baby. Who's
They're
paying?
gonna give it to everybody that's got cash.
You got money, you
CIK,
get COVID vaccine.
baby, cash is king.
Yes.
Give it to me, and I will give you your vaccination. But
Yes.
no, I mean, I would say 6 months, right? In my mind, 6 to 8 months before 60 to 70% of the population will have access to it and actually get it. Because there's going to be a certain group of people that are going to take 6 months just to convince to get it.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to see the other 50% before they go, all right, I'll go ahead and do it. So we've got to achieve that herd immunity somehow. The way that they're referring to achieving that herd immunity is just letting the virus run rampant until we get that vaccination. And that's where we start to run into a problem, because that's where you potentially talk about loss of life, because people get it that will die because of complications because of other chronic disease states that they have, and all of a sudden now they get COVID, and those disease states are exaggerated and puts them in a compromised position. So that to me is, let's call it what it is. It's essentially saying there's a certain group of people that if they get it, they're going to die, and we're okay with that. And I don't agree with that.
Right. I'm gonna throw you a question. It's not loaded. I don't have like I'm not after anything. But do you think it's fair to call lack of pandemic response or comments like this that lead to like lack of pandemic? We know they don't care at this point. They're just like, get the vaccine, open things up, let's do this like we do any other drug. Is it fair to label that genocide?
Oh wow, that's a tough one.
The reason I ask is because I've seen that in the Twitterverse before. I've seen it in some corners of the internet that it's like it's a genocide of a certain population because they don't care and they're allowing them the potential of death. They're not out there killing them, but they're going to let something kill them without really regarding it as a major loss. And I don't know that that's the right word. I almost think we need to invent a new word.
I agree, because genocide implies that there is one bad actor out there that's
Right.
causing major catastrophic issues for another group of people. No,
Yeah.
I just don't think genocide is the
It's
right
not the
word.
right word, but you need a word for complete lack of care or when knowing you could take action to help and refusing to do so, and it results in the death of a bunch of people. Like, what is that thing?
Yeah,
And
and I'm not saying
Og's word is F-tarticide.
F-tarticide, yeah. And the funny thing is, I don't believe it's just one person. I mean, we can
Yeah.
ascribe it to one person, but I believe it's quite a it's starting to be a pervasive within our society. And that's what I'm starting to struggle with, is the lack of empathy that we're really showing our fellow man and our fellow neighbor. And it's soul crushing to watch. Um, and I think it's disheartening.
Yeah, I think it's probably the bottom line of it is you're just seeing a lot of people with the idea of like, well, or there's the selfish notion of like, well, if I get it, I die or I don't die. It's just me. When it's
Yeah.
not, like it's a communicable disease that you could pass to any number of people that could die because of what you did. But there's no way to trace that. There's no way to track that. It's not like you're standing there with a knife and you're just like, haha, that person's dead. So you could potentially pass through life never knowing the result of that stupid action you took by taking your mask off and partying with your buddies at the World Series. You know,
Well,
the
so
trickle
how do you?
down.
Well, here's another question for you. How do you distinguish that from the mothers that are doing their the crap in Utah? Let me
Yeah,
get into
yeah.
the
Jump
story,
into
and
that, and then we'll talk about it.
I'll jump into it. So there's a group of mothers right now that have created this so-called mom code because they want their kids to go to school. They desperately want their kids to go to school. They desperately want the schools to stay open. And so, what they're encouraging their fellow moms to do is to say, okay, if your son or daughter is exhibiting symptoms of COVID, keep them home, but don't have them tested and don't report it.
Ooh,
And
that's
so what they're trying to do is keep the numbers down such that it doesn't look as bad as what it should look so that they'll keep the schools open. So they're artificially deflating the numbers there. So you've got things like that happening. I mean, how do we balance this out where we're actually, cuz you could also argue that that's not taking care of your fellow man either, right?
yeah. I don't know that seems people don't understand the importance of data, um, and why we need to know who has it and why and looking. We're bad about looking beyond a handful of people. Like I think as a culture in America, we're used to having about 100 people we care about or care about us in any fashion. And anybody outside of that orbit is just that car passing you on the highway with somebody in it. And you always
Mhm.
think like, don't get hit by a car. There's like that disconnect from that. There's another human who might just be on their way to pick up their kids from school when you walk out in front of that car. But we disembody it. We say, don't get hit by a car. When you're driving down the road, that car cut me off. That car did this, and we don't want to understand that other people are just making their way through the world today, given everything they've got. You know,
Yeah.
a little bit Cheers reference there for you. But you know, they don't we don't look at it that way. So these moms in Utah are looking at their little people going, hey, if we don't tell anybody, we can just get over it and our kids can keep going to school. But like that spread happens. The kid that their kid doesn't even like hang out with much at school, but they're seated next to them in biology. And now they're giving that kid a disease. He's taking it home to his grandma. You know, because his mom didn't know about the don't be sick rule or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
The
just
mom code rule, yeah.
yeah, the mom code rule. It's just I don't like it, but I think that they need to understand that it's not out to get them. It's not out to get them. Closing schools isn't out to like screw you over so you
Yeah.
can't have your day or you can't do what you needed to do or your meeting's disrupted because your kid keeps bursting in the door. It's to protect us and to get the understanding of how this virus travels. We're still trying to understand it. We're still trying to get our hands on like what does it actually do? What are the indicators that say this person's going to get more sick than this person? What pre-existing conditions are worse when you get COVID? Like all those things are still things we're trying to understand. Like you were
Mhm.
told and mentioned before, this virus is remarkably young in the history of science and how we examine stuff. We've had a million years to study polio to the point that we're injecting it in brain tumors to try and treat cancer. We
Yeah.
understand polio. We know what it is, which also was a headline I saw that there might be another resurgence of polio due to all this anti-vax crazy pants madness. I don't know. I'm not really worried about that. I think that's a hype train. But like there's just that we need to understand it. We need the data. I don't want other people to get there, but if you do get it, if you do end up with it, we need to know. We need to have the
Yeah.
stats. We need to know what your conditions are, how much you weigh, are you a sickly person? What's going on with your blood? These are I'm not a scientist. I'm just saying those seems
Well,
like
we
things we'd want to know.
well, not only that, but I think we want to understand it for a larger population context so that we can
Yeah.
understand what's going to happen overall. Um, But getting back to the mom code thing, the reason why I think I'm struggling with that is because it's a mentality that's created, and it's this. I feel like that is currently what we're struggling with more than COVID. We're struggling with the mentality associated with COVID, the struggles of staying in lockdown for 7 months or 8 months, or this exhaustion, or you can't tell me what to do. I mean, there's a church here in North Carolina, down in Charlotte, that's been linked to 3 spreader events. 121 people have gotten it. 3 people are dead. It's in the nursing home across the street now. The government actually came in, the city of Charlotte came in and said, "You are shut down. There is no more church service for you." Um, but does that infringe on people's rights to worship and express their religion and blah 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 blah? So
No.
but my point here is this: I feel like what we're faced with is not necessarily a struggle against COVID anymore. It's a struggle against people's approach to COVID and their mentality at this exact moment.
Yeah. I'll tell you this one thing about that Mecklenburg County church is
Mhm.
if your idea of church is the building you have to be in, and your idea of worship is having to be in that building, you're confused on what church is. And we need to have a conversation about whether that building is that it's Asgard, Jacob. It's
Yeah,
Asgard. Asgard is not a place, it's a people.
that's right.
Yeah, we're we don't need the building, but if you insist on cramming everybody into that building, I think you've lost sight of what the goal is. Is that where you? I'm about to get preachy. I was about to say. I'm gonna say it. Is that where your offering plate is? Is that the key? Is that the thing that's got you wanting to drag everybody in because your service is old and doesn't understand online giving? Maybe that's a potential. I don't know. I'm making a big, broad brush statement there, but I mean, it's it's Asgard. It's Asgard. You can do it. You can do it in a myriad of different ways that don't involve you cramming everybody together in a big tent revival and causing 3 people to die, 121 people to get it and spread it all over the community. There's better ways.
So what do you think your if you had to go to the pastor of that church, who had apparently been approached 3 or 4 times by government officials and asked to shut down because they were actually spreading this, and there's a number of cases linked to their church, what would you say to that pastor at that moment, saying, "Look, guys, there's 121 people, 3 people dead. You got a nursing home across the street that's linked cases to your establishment. Guys, let's stop this."
I would say the same thing I just said on this podcast. I would say if you think that this building is the key to your worship service, then we have lost sight of what the actual worship is. And it's time to reset, and
Yeah.
maybe we should find a new pastor because you need to understand that you're killing your flock, and you need to work on what is church. You need to go back and revisit
Yeah.
what is church. Oh, not what is a church. What is church? Um, and
Yeah.
get on the right wagon. That I would be really upset. I'd be really upset. I'd be like, you can't actively ignore this situation and then say it's in God's hands, because you can take action. You can
Yeah.
take action to do something and make a change and make a difference, and then it's not in God's hands when you are literally his hands and feet. According to the Bible, they say you are the hands and feet. We are the thing that should be making the difference. And that ticks me off. I don't like this whole where it's all in God's hands. Sure, it is, but
Yeah.
you're the you do the job. You do the representation on earth for other people. You're gonna get me on a high horse, Jacob. I'm carrying my Reverend card in my pocket.
Guys, I want you guys to all look at Steven's neck at this moment. It's beet red. He just
So mad.
I got him mad as hell.
You did. I get so irritated. I get so frustrated. It's not as hard as people make it out to be. It's not that difficult.
But again, in my mind, I'm going to stick with this right now. Is I truly believe we're fighting a mentality. We're not fighting
Yes.
the disease
No.
at this moment. Yes, we are fighting the disease, so don't take that completely literally. We are still fighting that, but we're fighting a mentality war right now, which is I think even harder.
Yeah, it's a battle, and it's going to continue to be a battle. But I want to get back to the data science because this half hour power is now an hour and 15 minutes in. But because we don't know,
We knew it was going to happen.
we knew we knew we weren't going to go to bed. Pfizer, the latest news on vaccine. Pfizer has issues getting enough people sick. They have one of the lowest testing groups. Like so many tests are supposed to come back with people sick up to a certain point. Like I think one company's got 75 they want back to see how things went. They've 32. Pfizer wants 32 people. They haven't been able to get 32 sick people with their tests. So they can't determine if the placebo worked. They can't determine if the vaccine worked. They need at least 32 people to come back sick. And they don't have that number. That's not a huge number. I don't really know how big their sampling pool is. I'm sure that's in this article somewhere, and I haven't read it.
Big.
It's pretty big, and they can't find 32 people to come back with COVID so they can go, oh, this works or that doesn't work. And they're the smallest sampling size, therefore the fastest, the one expected to get done the quickest, and it's not there. I thought that was kind of interesting. As prevalent in as many cases as there are, I'm shocked that the pool of people being tested for this with this vaccine hasn't been able to return 32 people.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say beyond that. I'm learning more about the vaccine process and drug approval processes because the media won't get out of the scientist way, so I can learn about it. And I didn't know that there was this like sample size factor.
I got to tell you, every study that I've ever done, there's always a sample size that determines the population. So right now they have 36,000 people who have received both doses of either the vaccine or the placebo. And of those 36,000 people, less than 32 have come back positive.
That's amazing. 32,000. We're seeing 80,000 cases a day. And this, I want to get in on this test. Because placebo or not, you're pretty good if you know, or they're being safe, or they're wearing their masks and being safe.
Right. There is a bias inherent in clinical trials. The people who sign up for clinical trials oftentimes are the ones exhibiting the best behaviors. For example, if you want to do a study in diabetics, right? And you have a clinical study out there for type 2 diabetics or type 1 diabetics or whatever it may be, the people who actually sign up for the study are the ones who have their type 2 diabetes under control. Yeah. Because they're the ones who want all the information. They want to be on the front lines. They want to be on the cutting edge. They want to be on the clinical studies. They want to try to improve their condition. So their chances are they're going to be the ones that are the most adherent. The ones that you really want to target are the least adherent people. But the problem is you can't sign them up because they are the least adherent people, and you can't convince them to come do a clinical study because they're like, F my diabetes. I don't need it. I don't need a clinical study. I want my sugar.
You can't give the guy doing his shots in his neck on the study because he's just not. He has no idea how to treat it anyway, and he's barely listening.
Right. And I'm not saying that this study is struggling from that, but a lot of times when you ask people to sign up for a clinical study, you are getting back the better adherent folks. So the people who are probably going to be wearing masks, more or less, the people who are probably going to be social distancing, the people who are probably going to be limiting their exposures in indoor settings, etc. I mean, those are the kind of people that you're probably going to get. So it does not shock me that they're having these kind of problems.
Yeah, you're not going to get like the people out there working with no mask on all day to come in and do the job. Yeah. like go ahead and do this. You're getting the intellectual who's excited to participate in a clinical trial, who wears his or her mask every day. Yeah, you're right. I think that's an interesting take on it, and I appreciate that you're here to give it to us. But with that, I think that's probably good for a staring at goats. I think we've recapped it. We've ranted about sports. We've talked about our beach trip.
TV's Travis, I am so sorry you missed my rant about Justin Turner. I wish you could have been here. I was a little pissed off with him.
It was a good one, Travis. Go back and listen to the show. But yeah, man, it's been a great show. I don't know who we're gonna have next week. I don't have a guest lined up. Or no, I do. Coleman Ranahan's gonna join us next week. Coleman,
See Pat Ranahan.
yes.
Hand.
C Pat Ran is on Twitch, Twitch TV / C Pat Ran. He's gonna be joining us. Coleman's been a friend of mine via the internet for, Lord, 13, 15 years now. Pre H&H. He's been a good buddy of mine on the internet, and he works in the entertainment industry. Might be good talking about that, but he's also got good interest in other things like sports. He might have some good commentary. Anyway, I'm just looking.
I'm gonna have to ask him. He's out there in California, and so I want to hear what his opinion is of Justin Turner. I think he's a flaming asshole. Let's hear what C Pat Ranahan has to say.
Yeah,
that's gonna be my first question in the interview next week. First question: what is your opinion about Justin Turner? Go.
Yes. So you all have that to look forward to. Coleman is an entertaining human being. I'm excited to have him on the show. If you like this show, please give us a review on your favorite podcasting service. That would be amazing for us. You can follow me on Twitter, Steve H&H, and our Staring at Goats Twitter at staring_goats. And if you want to support us, patreon.com/2dorks. patreon.com/2dorks. I want to thank our patrons. We already have Hammer Dwarf, Og, Adam, and Christina of Geekheim, Oddly Normal One, and our parents. We really appreciate that. We're going to be scheduling our charity stream for Toys for Tots. I think we've got a date nailed down, and we'll mention it out loud when I talk to Jacob. And then we'll get it nailed down and have that coming towards us. And we'll also be doing a book release party for Horizons on November 10th. So mark your calendars, because that's going to be a great time.
That's like a week and a half away, guys.
I know. The book is finally coming out. I'm so excited. I want to hold it in my hands because it's beautiful and the stories are great. Everybody's going to have a lot of fun with that. But thank you guys so much for joining us on Staring at Goats. We love you. We'll see you next week. Bye. That's a show in the can.